welcome to another episode of The Bleeding Edge. Got a VIP guest for you guys here today, Mr. Bill George, the ex-chairman and CEO of Medtronic. Bill, how are you doing today?
Mike, thank you for having me on my show. It's a thrill to be back in this field.
Yep, I hear you. Yeah, we had a nice interchange over LinkedIn for those of you that didn't see it. And I did a post about Bill a while back, and he was kind enough to agree to come on the show. For those that aren't familiar with Bill's work after leaving Medtronic and leading Medtronic through what I call the golden years of Medtronic, you had an unbelievable run there. There's no doubt about that your successes are well documented. But I
was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. So that's all I can say.
Humble. But for those of you that aren't familiar with his work, since then, he's been staying quite busy and keeping an impact in the business world worldwide. He's been teaching leadership at his alma mater, Harvard Business School. He's been consulting with some of the most notable CEOs and companies worldwide. And he's been, in my opinion and widely held opinion, two of the most enduring books on leadership ever penned, Authentic Leadership and True North. And most recently launched I think it's the third edition of True North, which is the Emerging Leader edition.
It's aimed, Mike, at people on this call that are going to be, we need to take over and lead right now. So it's really, I consider virtually an all-new book. You can't change all new ideas, but most of the stories and people are new. So
yeah, and what struck me about some of the context around the book, Bill, your awareness of how the old style of leadership, I'm going to call it the Jack Welch style. Jack probably wouldn't appreciate that, but it worked for him at that time. In today's environment, it just doesn't work. And for you to be where you're at and to have the skill sets that you utilized back when you were leading at Medtronic to be successful, and then to realize that doesn't work today, and to try to disseminate the new style of leadership to the today's leaders and the future leaders of tomorrow, I think is really notable and just speaks to your continued commitment to helping leaders grow over time. So thank you for rewriting the book and for putting that out there.
Yeah, so let me just say, Mike, I think you nailed it. We're going through a big generational change in leadership, from baby boomers to Gen X, millennials, and the new Gen Z. But I actually think it's deeper than that. It is the change in how one leads today. And people are not going to put up with the old style of leadership. Bob Chapek at Disney tried that, and we see how well that worked for him. And so I can tell you it's just not going to happen. So we need people on this call to step up and take on leadership roles.
Yep. No doubt about that. Well, I know we've got limited time, so I want to jump into some of the meat and potatoes of this. You've seen the evolution of medtech and digital health markets unfold over the past several decades. In your opinion, how is leading an organization today different than when you were at the helm of Medtronic?
It's much more challenging, I can tell you, because the forces are coming at you from all sides. Now, I'm a believer in the stakeholder model. I'm so pleased when the Business Roundtable shifted from shareholder primacy to stakeholders, but this just means everyone feels they have a stake in the company. And I think today employees have agency. So each employee group feels they want to be heard. And given the shortage of people in the workplace, I see we just hired 517,000 more people in January, kind of a shocking number. The economy is still rolling. There's still a shortage of talented people out there. And so that's really changed. And I think an awful lot of external organizations feel like they want the company to be persuaded to follow what they want. So it's much more challenging. And I think CEOs really have to stay very true to their mission and values to get through this period.
So you bring up an interesting point. There's layoffs are all the rage these days, right? I saw the piece you did on Yahoo News the other day, and companies are still hiring, but yet the same companies that are hiring are letting tens of thousands of people go. They're quick to whack 10% of their team, seemingly to appease the street. I'm curious your impression of the trend and, how you would be approaching layoffs if you were leading an organization today.
Yeah, well, first of all, those companies are still making billions. Those companies laying off people at such a ferocious rate. I mean, Amazon's had more financial troubles, but they laid off 18,000. The only one that hasn't is Apple, which is kind of significant. Yep. And you could say, well, they're a product company, but they do an awful lot of lines of software code as well. So I think companies made a mistake the tech companies. I'm not talking about Medtech. I'm talking about the IT tech companies, way overhired during the growth period. And one thing we did at Medtronic when we were growing at 18% a year is we really held off on permanent hires unless we were sure that we needed that person for the long term. And instead, we would do contract hires for the short term if we were trying to fill in a gap. And that made some of the middle managers not very happy with me. But we were quite conservative in hiring. So we were kind of slow hire, slow to fire, and tried never to lay off. And I had a policy of never, no matter what happened, of laying off R&D people. I mean, if people aren't performing, they could leave. But we never had a layoff, and we never had a layoff among our salespeople either. The problem is, once you do that, you lay off 10%. What about the other 90? Instead of sitting around the lunchrooms coming up with creative ideas or figuring out how to serve customers, they're worried about rumors that there's another layoff coming. That's really distracting. So I never wanted that to happen. So that's why we were a little more cautious on the hiring side. And I wish the tech companies had been. And they're all admitting now, oh, we overhired. I mean, great leaders like Mark Benioff at Salesforce, said we overhired. Well, they were not watching the till. They were not keeping control over their hiring.
Yeah, it's got to be a confusing message to the market too, because recruiting is the lifeblood of every company. And if you're laying off massive amounts of people, but then you're still interviewing people for other roles, do you think that that's going to have an effect on the culture of these organizations and their ability to continue to attract the talent that they've attracted in the past?
Yeah, I think as far as the IT tech sector, the bloom is off the rose. I think it's going to have a huge impact on their culture. And it's going to impact the people's commitment to the companies, their loyalty. And I think it's going to force them to now rethink work. The tech companies have not wanted people to come back to the office. So downtown San Francisco, you have that huge Salesforce tower that's empty.
Yeah.
Okay. And, Apple built a new campus, and Facebook or Meta built a new campus. And, way too much office space. But I do think that I would be blunt in saying I think if you have a choice, who are you going to lay off? You're going to lay off people who come into the office and you get to know and you collaborate with and really come up with creative ideas, or the people that are sitting at home writing code. And it's probably going to be the latter. The people you never even met, that never been in there. You have never been in the office for the 2 years they've been hired. So they're, quote, easy. Like, I think it's cruel the way they're doing it by Twitter, by the way. But so I think they're going to have to totally rethink their culture. Now, I don't think in the medtech field you've seen anything like this. I think the companies that are doing well are still doing well, like Stryker and Boston and others. I think it's a very different game. But I do think it's causing people to rethink the whole culture. And how are they going to hire talent? Are you going to want to go there? Everyone wanted to go to Google. Everyone wanted to go to Amazon or Microsoft or Apple and Meta. And now what are you going to think? Yeah, I think that's caused people to rethink their careers.
Do you think that the medtech digital health sector will be a benefactor of that?
Yeah, I think Medtech's trying to attract somebody that's attracted to the healthcare mission there.
Yeah.
As we said at Medtronic, restoring people to full life and health. But we're all in the same business. Everyone in Medtech, yeah, I think so. And, Medtech has a huge amount of the same technology. I mean, it's lines of code. I mean, we had 5 million lines of code in our first defibrillator in 1994.
That's unbelievable. Yeah.
There's a huge amount of technology in the products, and also people who understand the technology on the front lines that are working with doctors, because the doctors don't understand these complex products, and you need people who do. And so, yeah, I think that demand will continue to be there. So just to comment about the medtech session, when I joined Medtronic in 1989, we were looked at as kind of a device field, kind of poor boy, second cousin to big pharma, and they had all the potential. I've always felt this sector, I still feel even today, all these years later, is vastly underestimated in what it does for people. And it's not something you have to, if you get a spinal implant or you get a new hip or a new knee, that can last you for a very long time. You don't have to go to the pill box every day and take a pill or go to get your drugs renewed every 30 days. That can make a permanent change in your life. And there are no side effects. It's restoring you to full life. And everyone I know who's got an implant or something is doing so much better now. And they're so happy. And so I think it's a very different field that's been underestimated, because everyone said, oh, pharma's going to replace these products. No, it's not.
Yeah.
We need exactly what we're doing. Yeah, maybe somebody will have a miracle cure someday, but I don't, the heart's going to wear out, and we need products for the heart.
Let's get into some of the medtech and digital health specific components here. As you know, healthcare is tough sledding, and the convergence of healthcare and technology has made it even more difficult. We've seen a lot of missteps from Amazon, Google, Apple, et cetera. What do you see as the biggest challenge that digital health leaders are facing today, and how could they overcome that?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is understanding what I call the last 3 feet, the nature of clinical medicine. And I think one has to do that. is really important. And I think the medtech companies always come at it from that perspective, whereas the companies you just mentioned are coming at it from a pure IT standpoint. And it's not that simple, and it's hard to standardize everything. Now, I'm a huge believer in digital health. We moved Medtronic in that direction back in 1999. That was a long time ago, over 20 years, because I felt that was the future. And in I went out to spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley talking to all these companies and Microsoft as well up in Seattle. They didn't really understand health and how it worked. It's not just quantifiable. It's not as easy to do as something in an inert machine because of the humans. But I do think that digital health is key because, let's face it, the most expensive place to be is in the hospital itself. You can pick up a lot of other people's diseases there. So people want to get in and out, but then somebody's got to do the follow-up. And why should that not done be remotely? I was on the board of Mayo for 7 years. If you come to Mayo from Duluth, Minnesota, that's a 4-hour drive.
Right.
You don't want to come back. You want to be connected digitally. You want to be able to talk to your doctor. It was a tragedy that until COVID came along, we didn't even reimburse for telemedicine. But doctors need data. They need to know what's going on. To the extent that you can do this through digital health, I think there's just a huge market there because it's just too costly to have people come into the hospitals or even into the clinics. There's no reason we can't do an awful lot of these things remotely. I mean, I doubt we're going to do surgery remotely anytime soon, but all the follow-up and everything else and an awful lot of the diagnosis can be done if you give the doctors data. And digital health can provide that kind of data and information. I have high blood pressure. I want to know that information. My doctor needs to know that. And so that can be easily downloaded online. I don't want to have to run into Rochester, Minnesota, and drive down there for an hour and a half, 2 hours to get measured. So think about it that way. And I think the field has tremendous potential.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think one of the clear areas that I think is going to be a winner moving forward is going to be the transitioning of care from the hospital to the home as well. Not just even so much after the patient's discharge and when they would be discharged today, but moving that discharge forward and getting them set up to recover at home versus having to recover for 5 days in the hospital and whatnot. And the technology is there and the bandwidth is there to be able to do that. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. You were widely known as being an incredible recruiter at Medtronic. And as I mentioned before, recruiting is the lifeblood of any organization. Leaders live and die by the talent they can attract. But so few companies really put an emphasis on it or even organized around it. And this ties in probably back to the new edition of True North. But what's your advice for early stage companies that are trying to build and to attract really good talent in today's market? What would be the one thing that you would recommend?
Recruit people to come into leadership roles and for a career, not just for a short-term job. And I think that's where a lot of the tech IT companies made a mistake. It was like they just want somebody to write lines of code, and they weren't really thinking about it. And then offer them the opportunity to be developed and develop their talent within the company and provide those opportunities. But I think that's what you do when you sit and you're recruiting people. It's not just about today's job, but the potential people have. And to think of everyone as a leader, not just people on top, but giving them those opportunities to continue to develop themselves and then have those development opportunities and use those to recruit. And so people think it's just about salary. No, people want a life. They really do. And I think it's, how are you going to provide them that opportunity? How are you going to create an environment where I really want to be I love my work and I want to be there. If I take my work home, I can do it there. But I want to have someplace I'm proud to work. I can go tell not just my family, but my friends, anyone in my community, I'm proud to work at this company. And if you're not that, life is not fun. So I think it's really important that companies look at the whole person and recruit for that and for the long term.
Yeah. A lot of what you talked about in the new edition of True North is, people want to be impassioned. They want to feel, I use the word viscerally connected to the mission of the company. And if you haven't established that and you haven't been able to take your vision and put it into the mind of those that you're recruiting into the organization, it's going to be an uphill slog for sure.
And when it is all about the mission, and so the mission is not writing lines of code. It's thinking about how you're helping the person on the far end of that. Even if you're if you're in the R&D labs, or you're working in production, or you're working in administration or in IT, but think about why you're doing this. And, if you're a systems developer inside one of these companies, look what Emma Southwest, they didn't develop their IT systems. Well,
Right.
these things are the backbone, and healthcare needs that. So digital health from the company forward is critical, that we get people excited that can do that kind of work and get really excited and realize they're there to help patients. So there is a mission. The mission is not just, as you mentioned, Jack Welch, it's not just making money as GE was doing. Of course, GE's gone now.
Right.
The tragedy, GE is no longer. Yeah, we got a jet engine division and a medical equipment division, but yeah, those are nice spinoffs, but there's no GE.
Yep.
Because they destroyed, his successor destroyed the company. And that's a tragedy. It's a lot reminder of companies really have to stay in tune with today. And I think some companies are still playing the stock market game of yesterday. You had mentioned layoffs. I think they are reacting. Our stock price is down 20%. Yeah, but business is still strong. So, are you playing to the stock market, or are you trying to build a company? If you build a company, the stock price inevitably will follow.
Yep. No, and I mentioned that on one of your posts. Wall Street will be patient if CEOs can communicate a vision and a plan. They get impatient when neither of those are present and the stock price is struggling.
Or you don't tell them the truth. You don't tell them the whole story, and you have a lot of negative surprises. Sometimes, like they're just talking about Apple. Apple had a down quarter. But they communicated. No one was surprised. And it's going to come back strong. Whereas other people, I can't say such positive things about.
Yeah. No, I agree. As you know, in medtech and digital health, being a first-time early-stage founder it's a seemingly impossible task, in my opinion. Oftentimes these folks are coming from clinical practice and just had a really good idea. They don't have any business experience. They don't have any leadership experience. And, they're kind of building their leadership plane while they're flying it. What would be your advice for those first-time founders that are trying to find their way with leadership and developing employees and attracting employees and leading an organization?
Don't be a loner. Team up with somebody. If you come out of clinical practice, you're an engineer, you're a doctor, you got a great idea. Team up with somebody who's got a very sound business background and had more experience than you've had. And then, hire a great financial person as your CFO, even if you can't afford it, rent one. But
right.
You need to have a team. Like at Medtronic, I had no medical knowledge when I got there. I had 25 years of high-tech experience. But I teamed up with a guy named Glenn Nelson, who became our vice chairman, and he was fantastic. And he was a medical doctor and knew everything about science, technology, and the intersection with medicine. And that he was key. And so we had a partnership. You need to form that partnership. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are brilliant people, brilliant inventors, but they haven't teamed up with anyone. I mean, I mentioned Apple. The only reason Apple's doing so well is because Steve Jobs had this guy named Tim Cook who he could team up with.
Right.
And unfortunately, Steve died. But, he's there. I wish Elon Musk would team up with someone. I think that is key. Don't try to do it all yourself. Get people that are really sound at things you don't do. Maybe you have no idea how to go from producing 10 of something to 10 million. Well, maybe you need to get people that really understand mass production.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned renting a CFO, and I'm surprised that as many tech companies got caught with as many full-time employees as they did, especially when contract work is so commonplace in that space. And I was talking to Joe Mullings about this last night. We both think that contract work is going to be a big future in our business in terms of medtech, just because it allows you to expand and to bring skill sets into the organization and to be able to grow without that full-time commitment. One of the things you said I think it was an interview a while back, you said at Medtronic, if somebody on your team wanted to hire a leader, the question you would always ask is this person going to be here 3 years from now if we go through a down cycle? And contract work is a way to work around that.
Yeah, and I don't feel guilty about that. If I hire you for 90 or 180 days, we reach the end of that and say, okay, your contract's over, and thank you very much for the work you did. But I don't feel guilty about that. If I hire someone for the next 10 years and I lay them off 10 months later, I should feel guilty, and I do,
Sure.
That's not right. And I've broken not a contract, but I've broken a verbal bond. See, that's the problem, is a lot of companies want loyalty from their employees, and yet they don't get the loyalty back.
Right.
And I think that's a big change. I think it's a huge mistake. Everything is a two-way street, and it's nice that you have all these perks, but then to take them off when times get tough, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So I like your idea. Let's say you're on the right point. Let's just bring in some contract workers to to churn out lines of code.
Yep. No, absolutely. One of the interesting things in digital health right now is there's this, what I call a talent void or a void in the talent pool. The healthcare people understand the delivery networks, the technology people understand the technology, but there's very few people that understand both really well. Now, that won't be the case for very long, 3-5 years down the road, maybe even less. There's going to be a reskilling that will occur in the marketplace. What advice would you have for digital leaders that are trying to build a technology company in healthcare right now and are struggling with that challenge in the marketplace of not so oftentimes we work on roles. I'm working on a VP of marketing role right now where, that perfect person doesn't quite yet exist in the talent place. What advice would you have?
I'm inferring from what you said, Mike, that you're talking about people that come from a digital background. And I give them two pieces of advice. One piece of advice, again, is why I just said team up with somebody that understands clinical medicine. Second, get out in the clinics yourself and go see them. Go see how your products are used. Go get on the front line and go see what's happening. See that, then you're going to understand the variability in healthcare. Every surgery my son does is different than the last surgery. There's no standardization. And a lot of people have tried to force that in. But you've got to understand that. And the only way to understand it is to actually see it. And, when you go see a procedure, all your emotions are working, touch, feel, smell, your sense, how you feel about the person whose life is on table. So that could be and so I think if you just sit back at a computer, you don't have those feelings. You just have your brain power working. And I think getting out there, knowing what's going on is absolutely key.
Yeah. And as it relates to trying to fill those roles in your organization where that perfect candidate doesn't exist, and maybe they've got the healthcare experience, but they don't have the tech, or they have the tech, but they don't have the healthcare experience. Is that where you would bring in contract work, or how would you try to work around them?
No, that's where I would get people to team up.
Yeah.
I'd make sure we had a sufficient number of real digital competency. Medtronic, we had the opposite. We had lots of great engineers. We didn't have enough people that really understood healthcare. But that's where I would get them to team up and work together. But that's going to challenge this whole idea of remote work.
Right.
Hey, I believe in hybrid work. If you want to work in the office 3 days a week and at home 2 days a week, that's fine. But I think you're going to have human contact. We are human beings. We like that contact. And I think the energy levels, the creativity, the collaboration goes way up when we're in personal contact. So I think it's been a mistake, the idea that you're never going to come into the office. You can work at home the rest of your life. I just don't think this is going to work. I think it's going to be a hybrid. I'm not saying, I believe in flexibility.
Yeah.
I believe in a kind of rigidity. You got to be there 5 days a week from 8 to 5. No, I believe in flexibility, and I think that's key to offer people. But at the same time, I want to see you, and I want to get to know you. And frankly, I found I learned most when I was a CEO of Medtronic, just wandering around talking to people.
Yep.
And that's where I learned the most what was going on. And I think a lot of these big companies, the CEOs get isolated up in their executive suites. They have no idea what's going on.
Right.
So as these companies get bigger, that's why they lose their creativity, because they're out of touch with the creative process. They're not down in the labs. They don't understand what's happening.
And you can't do that if people aren't in the office.
No, you can't do it. No, you can't do it, working strictly from home.
Yep.
So, but again, I'm not against that. I'm just saying I think it's a hybrid environment. And so we're going to have to figure out how to make that work.
Yep. No, I wholeheartedly agree. This is more a general topic, but I really want to get your thoughts on this because I know you've got some strong opinions, and I think you've done a really good job of walking the line here. There's a lot of pressure on CEOs to weigh in on social issues these days. It can at times be disruptive to an organization regardless of its size. What advice do you have for leaders out there that are, trying to handle these sensitive types of topics within their company?
Well, I get a lot of calls. It's number one, we run new CEO programs at Harvard. The number one question I get from CEOs is, when should I weigh in? And most of them are very uncomfortable doing it.
Right.
But they have this expectation from their employees and from a lot of customers that they need to take a position. I say it all comes from your mission and values. So if an issue reads directly on your mission or your values, it's incumbent on you to take a position. So I'll give you an example. I'm here in Minneapolis where a lot of Medtech companies are based. In fact, I wish we had more startups, but 2 miles from here, George Floyd was murdered. When that happened, if you didn't take a position, not just on how you felt about that, but actually take a hard look at the life of your BIPOC employees and realize some of the struggles they're facing and have a plan to correct it, then you aren't going to make it here. I can tell you, you had to take a position on it. It was front and center.
Yep.
And so I think of nothing. I hate this word woke, so you can call woke. That's not being woke. That's taking care of your employees. That's standing up for them, being there for them.
Leading.
Yeah, lead. If it's your customers, if it's the market, if it's a healthcare issue, you better take a position on it. You better have knowledge. You don't have to be lobbying in Washington or in the state capitol, but you better have a position on these key issues and how you feel about it. And I think this is critical. So that's what you're expected to do. But no, I'm trying to do business in China, but it doesn't have to say, well, we're going to weigh in with the Chinese government about the Uyghurs and how they're being treated. I think it's horrible the way they're treated, but I'm not saying anything, I'm not taking a public position on that, because that's not my area. I have to figure out what's in my area, what's in my bailiwick, and what's not. And by the way, just an add on to that, the reason Disney got so much trouble with the governor of Florida is because Chapek said he wasn't going to say a word, and then he got forced into it by his gay employees. I wouldn't surprise you that Disney has a lot of gay employees. It's incredible, the creativity. Yeah, it's true. So, but then he changed his position. So I think he's the CEO. If you change your position on something, that's when the activists come after you. That's when the politicians come after you. So if you stand for something, Medtronic stands for helping patients. And so anyone wants to take Medtronic on, that's fine. We're going to stand forever with helping patients. And if you think that's being woke or something else, fine, go ahead and think that. But I think that's really critical to take a stand. We're going to stand for getting patients the care they need.
Right.
Give you an example. The AMA tried to cut Medtronic off from all training of physicians. And we did train 4,000 or 5,000 physicians a year in our headquarters, plus thousands elsewhere. That's our job. Our job is to train them. If people don't go to medical school to learn how to use a defibrillator, I guarantee, or how to implant one. You have new products. You have new products like for cerebral palsy or Parkinson's or, advanced spinal disease using bone morphogenic protein. You don't know how to do that. So, yeah, it was incumbent. We just stood in their face and said, we're going to do this. You can say whatever else you want. We're going to do it. Yeah, I can tell you, it's not a vacation coming to Minnesota in February to get training for 3 days. Even if we take you to a Timberwolves game, that's not a vacation. Let's get over it, guys. That's not like taking a group of doctors off to the Caribbean. That's a whole different deal.
Totally get it. Understood. As a recruiting junkie, I got to ask the question, because we're wrapping up here at the end of time. I want to be sensitive getting you out of here. But the 4-for-1 stock option plan, I want to know the genesis of that. That was the most brilliant recruiting tool I've ever seen. I know a lot of people it's created an insane amount of wealth for. And how did that come about? What was the genesis of that? And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this gets another pet peeve of mine. All the compensation's going to the people on top. I think you ought to spread that around. And I think we ought to give people an opportunity. Look, if the company's successful, why should I make the money? Why shouldn't everyone participate in the company's success? And the reality is you can't just raise your salary base so that happens. So what you want to do is you want employees to be owners of the company. And then you give them stock. And some of our board thought it was too generous. No, I said, this is a valuable tool we have, not just for recruiting, but also for retention.
Right.
Because, we're not just giving you that stock to cash out on day one and you leave on day two. You got to hold it for a while. We want loyalty to the company, and we're going to be loyal to you. We're going to give you an opportunity to make some money, because here's the reality I found people. No matter what salary you make, you don't save any money. The only way you can get your equity base. It used to be, buying and owning a home. You can do some of that, but real equity comes from the stock market's going up. So now the danger is, of course, then the stock price goes down and everyone's demotivated. So it's kind of incumbent on top management, starting with the CEO, to see that we're finding ways not to have a spectacular rise in our stock, but just a steady rise. Every year we're up 15% or so. And because then people are going to feel it, and then they can cash out at the end of that period and get a nice gain, and they can put some of their own equity in as well. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that.
That was a brilliant tool. I don't know if they still have. Do you know if they still have that in play today?
I don't know. All I know is that when everyone was surprised, we had our 50th anniversary, and we gave everyone 100 shares of stock, and they were shocked. They thought they might get $100. So this went to everyone on the production floor, because hey, who determines the quality? everyone said, oh, it's the quality department, talk to quality measures. No, it's the people in production that determine the quality, people in design. And so they had to participate. And a lot of companies are not, they're trying to drive down their cost to first line people and putting all the money at the top. In fact, look what's going on right now, real time on Wall Street. These companies, now they announce layoffs, so their stock price goes up. And, I think that's sinful. For me to take a big bonus, I'm going to get millions of bonus because I laid off 10,000 people this year.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with that picture. Yes, I have to manage tight, but maybe the reason I have to lay people off is I didn't manage very well coming up. That happened to a number of companies.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a red face test. And, you got to be able to say, yeah, is this reasonable for me to take that bonus?
Yeah.
If I'm laying those folks off. Bill, I thank you immensely for taking the time to come on. This was very insightful. I know it's going to be a huge hit with the audience. I wish you nothing but the best in all your future endeavors. I know the book will do great. If you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend it. It is an incredible, incredible piece for anybody that's a leader or manager that wants to become a leader. It would be one of the first books I recommend. So
thank you. I want to just add, we've got too many managers and enough leaders. So we need people, we need moral leaders that have a clear sense of values and where they're going. So I appreciate what you're doing here with the show and reaching so many people. And just to put in my 2 cents worth, Medtech is going to be a fantastic place to grow for the next 20 years. And it may not hit the ups and downs of pure digital, but the digital side is going to be just critical to everything that we do to improve healthcare. We know that we have to change healthcare, and this is a really important thing. And it hadn't been coming as fast as I'd like. I'd like to see it come a lot faster.
Yeah.
Anyone questioning their career in this field, hang in there and do it because we need you.
Well, yeah, and it's a neat industry because it can grow at 8-10% a year or whatever it is, but you've got those micro markets that can grow at 30, 40, 50% a year. And so to your point, you can really get into some really exciting work and it can be very rewarding personally and professionally. So
and I was just a final comment. You can go to work for Meta or Twitter and work on social media and think you're on the new thing. No, who are you really helping with that? Are you doing as much harm as good? Medtech is doing great help for people every day, for tens of millions of people. And so I'm making a little pitch here, but I think it's such amazing things when you see somebody whose life is restored by products that you help contribute to. Wow. And you had an influence, or you made their life so much better through digital health. Wow. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it is. And, these companies do these patient stories and it really does. It shows the impact that everybody from the assembly lines on down has. So it's a neat field to be in for sure. I've enjoyed my time in it and it's clear you're passionate about it. So thank you again. Best of luck in all the endeavors. And we'll look forward to following up with you on social media. And thanks again for joining me on the show.
Thanks, do it. And let's do it. Thanks for having me on your show, Mike.
Okay, that's it for this episode of The Bleeding Edge of Digital Health. Bill George, ex-CEO and chairman of the board at Medtronic. We'll see you on the next episode.